Yeah, the community connection, reaching out so far, linking minds and sharing insights, shining like a star. From the leaders to the learners, every voice can grow, planting seeds of understanding, watch the knowledge flow.
What's going on, everybody? This is Nathaniel Provencio, and as always, with my very good friend, best friend in the universe, Dr. Eric Worster. What's going on, Eric?
What's up, Daniel? Great to see you, pal. Looking sharp, as always.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I got this tie in Scotland. This is
All
a
right.
true Scottish Tartar sky, and it gives me good luck, right? It gives me good luck. So I need the luck today because we're going to take a test, Dr. Worster. Did you know this?
I did not, but I'm ready for it.
We're going to take a test, and we're going to take a test about assessments, right? This is what we're going to do. In order to help us prepare for this assessment on assessments, we've got two gurus on
Mm.
assessments, Nicole, Dr. Baker, Atlanta, Hotlanta, Georgia area, and then we've got Minneapolis, like in the other. Did you know that Janet Jackson sang about Minneapolis in Rhythm Nation? Eric, do you know about Rhythm Nation and Janet Jackson?
We are a part of Rhythm Nation. I
We
do.
are a part of it. We are a part of Rhythm Nation. So we've got a whole like cold and like the Southern, all kinds of like universes, DC coming together. Nicole, Dr. Baker, what's going on? Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Chilling, man, chilling. Nicole, you doing all right in the
Great.
cold?
I'm doing great as well in
Yeah,
the
how much
cold
snow you
tundra.
got? How much snow you got right now?
We just got about 8 inches yesterday.
Oh my
So I
goodness,
know it had
goodness.
melted a few days before, but now we're back in it. So winter is here for real.
Oh, I love it. Now listen, a lot of folks, I don't know about you, Eric, but a lot of folks don't talk about assessments enough, right? It's like test is just a four-letter word, something that
Hmm.
we've got to do to get some grades, and all this stuff. But like I've been evolving tremendously with my thought process about assessments, and we've got two of the finest over here, talking about that. But Dr. Mercer, I want to preface the show out. How much time did you spend as a principal talking about assessments? You had a K-8 school, so kind of wide range. What was conversations like for you back in the day when you had that principal hat on?
Great question, Nathaniel. I was always very deeply invested in meeting with my team for hours to go into how they were formed
No, you
and
no, you weren't. No, you weren't. You liar.
looking at the analysis of each question and then poring over the results and looking at next steps. So I would say yearly amount, probably honestly, for over the course of a year, maybe 10 hours at most.
A day? 10 hours a day or
No,
10
10
hours?
hours per year, 10 hours per year. That was mostly fictional, what I just said.
That
So
was
I wish I had done that.
exceedingly
I
fictional.
wish I had done that. I should have done that. But I had emails to answer and calls to return, unfortunately. So
Well, that's
yeah,
all
my,
right.
my focus wasn't always on assessment where it should have been. And what about you, my friend?
Assessments were interesting. God, man, it's almost like I wish I could like give me 6 months back in that principal seat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just let me go back a little bit and like correct some of those wrongs. But I think assessment at the start of my tenure was an afterthought. We teach
Mhm.
how we were taught, we lead how we were led,
Yeah.
and I think assessment was whatever we had, we used. And I think convenience sometimes overridden, over
On the road?
superseded,
Okay.
overrode convenience, overrode quality. I think. And I think just going through the motions, getting grades, until we really started growing as a professional learning community towards like the last, like maybe 5 years of my tenure, Nicole, we started to really leverage assessments more as a tool for us as opposed to our students. But that took almost a 5 year kind of like change, but we were never really perfect at it because test writing is hard. Test writing is pretty challenging. I don't know of anyone who's got that kind of like psychometrics background coming out of the classroom. And publishers, man, you guys know this. They spend a lot of money on putting those, assessments together to go with that curriculum. But then when you look at it, they really suck, most of the time, you know what I mean? So I don't know, but we're gonna fix this wrong right now with Nicole and Dr. Baker. So, Nicole, tell us a little bit about yourself. Dr. Baker, tell us a little bit about yourself and then how we can kind of like reevaluate evaluation. Nicole, I'll start with you.
All right, sounds good. Yes, assessment has a really bad reputation. It really does. It's so filled with stress, and I actually fell into focusing on assessment. I started moving around the country, so I'm from Minnesota, but landed out in New Jersey for a few years, and then fell into facilitating spaces of learning. So love to create spaces of possibility for young people as a teacher, as a coach, as an administrator, and then fell into facilitating learning. Then moved back to Minneapolis and started to I was going to go back into teaching, but then found this really cool project of transformation. So I worked with Minneapolis for a number of years, and a lot of my work was sitting down with teams to analyze student work from assessments, understand what was working in our instruction, what we wanted to do differently. And so then started to fall in love with this idea of how do we change and rebrand assessment, not as evaluation, but more about information. And certainly information for adults and educators, but also for students. And how do because students are stressed about assessment so often or grades,
Oh, yeah.
and so often they're defining their worth by how they did on this test or how they did on this or what the grade was. And then some kids are giving up. They're like done with it. And so I think assessment and grading just has to be rebranded and repositioned as information and is something that helps us understand strengths and next steps, both in our practice as educators, but also our systems, but really for our young people. And so fell into writing a number of different things, and Design in Five was just came about as sitting down with teacher teams and saying, how do we take these big ideas of assessment and make it doable and possible, so that assessment is information for teachers, teacher teams, and then also for students so that they can invest in their learning, and have been facilitating back landed back in Minnesota, spent 6 years in Georgia as well, and just really have gotten to learn from a ton of different educators about how do we take these ideas and rebrand them, because assessment at every level of the system has so much information, but often it's overwhelming and it will shut a system down, or it will help
Hmm.
or they'll turn and face the wrong end, a score on a test versus really important skills that are transferable. And then I ran into Anisa and
Yeah.
her amazing colleague and friend. And so for the last number of years, we've gotten to collaborate on a number of different things. I'm an architect for an assessment collaborative, and Anisa joined our team. And then we've gotten to know each other over the years. And I said, hey, what would you think if we made a handbook? Like make it even more doable, because just huge shout out to Anisa for her just brilliant brain and making these big ideas like, okay, this is how we can frame this. So I'm going to toss it to
Awesome.
her now.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Oh, Nicole, thank you. So I'm actually, she's right. We connected over the years. And so we connected as I was a principal. And so as a principal, we started using Nicole's Design in Five work from her first edition to change some things at our school. And so I was working in a district where we used a lot of assessments. And as a principal, that was really our evaluative tool to determine whether or not we were effective as a leader by how our school was performing on assessments. And so I inherited a school that was significantly underperforming. And the interesting thing about that is that really nobody knew how to turn our school around, but yet they were holding me accountable to turn the school around. So we had all of this
Hmm.
support coming in. We had district coaches coming in. We had the assistant soup coming in. And every time someone would come in, they would give us a different direction to go. So the ELA person would tell us to go right. The math person would tell us to go left. The assistant superintendent would come in and say, why are you doing this? And then when they would come back, they're like, well, we told them to go right, but then the other person told us to go left. And so it was always a clash of what we were doing, but nobody really
Hmm.
understood how to turn a school around. That was like our school. We had every single label you can think of except high
Hmm.
achieving. And at our scores were significantly low. Like, guys, any lower would have been hell. So that's
Hmm.
we really when we started doing, or we found Design in Five as a framework along with the PLC at work process, we really didn't have any reasons why we could not try this work, because everything that we had been doing, which you had mentioned earlier, we were teaching the way that we had taught. We were assessing the way that we were used to being assessed at school.
Hmm.
And we were not using assessment as a tool to help us drive instruction. It was always evaluative for the students, and it was always about a grade. So it wasn't helping us turn around our instructional practices. And we really had to start looking at what were we doing all day versus really the students have all these gaps. We can't teach them. We can't do this. We had to stop and think like, hey, it's really about what we're doing in the instructional realm in tier one as teachers and as a leader. So when we started using the Design in Five framework really to help us with assessment processes, and understanding how to use assessment, it really just revamped our whole thought processes and how we were responding to students and how we were preparing students for instruction and how we were using it to get our grades, and then what was our grades actually reflecting. Like, we were able to revamp our whole instructional framework to make it make sense for kids. So with that, under that is where we really made two things. And if you've been following on social media, you've noticed I put that out for like two things, like learning is required, collaboration is required, and then assessment drives learning. Like, that's what we're looking for. It's not just something that we give kids. It's not something that we do to kids. Like, we really have to use it to inform our instructional practices and then communicate to our kids where they are in terms of achievement practices. So when I met Nicole and we started doing this work, I was like sharing all these things. And I am the type of person, when we would go to institutes, I was very lucky because our districts would take us to institutes. And part of that, of being going to these institutes, because my school was underperforming when I inherited, I was on like a support plan as a principal.
Oh yeah.
So going to
It means you
these,
won the PD lottery.
yeah.
You
So
got the
part
PD
of
lottery, you know?
the support for being a support principal was that I had the opportunity to go to these professional development sessions. And so we were going to Solution Tree, we went to the assessment centers at that time before it was called the Assessment Collaborative. And so I was the type of person, if I'm here, I am going to sit in the front. My whole team sat in the front. We had matching shirts. Everybody was listening. We showed up on time. We stayed to the very end,
Awesome.
like to the benediction. Like, everybody hold hands, pray before we left. Like, everybody stayed. We were paying however much that price was. Like, we were there from the start to the end. The only time you would go to the restroom is when it was break time. Like, we're getting every single thing that these presenters were giving. And so that's how I first met Nicole. Like, I was asking questions, my team was asking questions, we were showing her work. Like, if we knew that we were going to see her, I was like, everybody get those assessments and let's go, because we can't afford to get them here. But all of us are here at this school. We're going to use every single moment. When they walk around, you ask your questions. So we had like assessments with sticky notes for questions for. She was
That's
like, oh
awesome.
my gosh, you guys are doing this work. I was like, okay, so look at phase 3. So this is what our plan was. Like, so we were like capitalizing off of these things. And at that time, it was so interesting because, as presenters, we're like, if you have any questions, please email us. And I was like, she said for us to email us. Let's email her.
Like that.
That's great.
So like,
Anisa,
we just end up staying in contact with each other.
how
Love
did
it.
you know who to bring with you? Like, how did you know what team was going to help you with this work?
To be very honest, I will tell you guys, I had such a wonderful staff. So at this time, I was at Lindsay Elementary, and when I tell you, I had a wonderful staff of teacher leaders, like, oh my goodness. And so when we built our Guiding Coalition, I had a small school too, so let me be very clear. I had a very small school, so it was the same people on pretty much all of the teams, like the Guiding Coalition, the
Right.
PBIS team. The like, it was really like the same thing. So we had about 80% of our staff that was truly, truly involved in a lot of things. Usually, it's the other way around, like it's 20%, but we had like
Yeah.
80% of our staff. So whenever we would go to different events, I would just take people off of my Guiding Coalition that were doing the work in certain things. So like, I knew the strengths and weaknesses of our teams, and I knew the strengths and weaknesses of the teachers. So when I was working with assessment practices, I knew the ones that were eager to learn and had already started reading the books. So I was taking people that I know would leverage the work in terms of teachers, because I had to figure out how to take the person. And also, like, I knew their learning personalities too. So I knew the ones that could actually go and hear somebody one or two times and actually pick it up and grasp it and could come back and teach us, versus people that can go and hear it, but they re-deliver their misconceptions. And so I was really strategic in who could go and hear assessment work, because that is different. Like, you really have to have a different mindset to truly understand it the first time, and then what it looks like if we want to go back and implement those things. So I took members off of my Guiding Coalition that already had strengths in responding to students, or already had strengths in looking into how to make assessment really work for them, or how to make it work for their students. So that's how I picked it. But to be very honest, eventually throughout my tenure, all of my teachers
Mm.
had attended a PLC institute and an assessment institute,
Mm.
every last one of them. Like, that was the goal, was for me to get everybody to go through it. So at any point in time, all of my teachers had the same capacity and had their same experiences in that work. So all of the teachers cycled through a PLC institute, all of the teachers cycled through an assessment one, and all the teachers cycled through an RTI.
I think
That's
it's
awesome.
brought a team with you. Nathaniel, have you experienced this? I know I did it as a principal.
I never had no money.
You'll go to a conference and you'll hear something and you might be excited, but if it's only you,
Who
Your
cares?
team can get exasperated. They're
Yeah,
like,
they get
great, he goes to
exasperated.
conference, another new idea.
Yeah.
Or you might love it, but you just run out of steam without people who are there collaborating with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's important, and I jest about like it's. I always find it interesting, and Nicole, I'm interested, and I want to get into assessment so bad, but like Anisa has brought up some really good points. Is that you have to be really failing really bad in order to get the gift of PD. And I always find that it's kind of crazy. Like, like the schools that are failing, like we'll give them all this PD, and it's almost as if all those other schools that are doing well are doing the exact same thing, like are doing everything right. And it's not true. And I always think about like, Anissa, you just told that story, five different central office folks, well-meaning, God bless them, bless their heart in the South, all were trying to tell you what to do, but no one was on the same page. So it's like everyone should be going to that PD to get on the same page. Because if it's good for Dr. Anisa's school, it's good for the whole district. I don't know. I just find it interesting because then, Eric, it does become, well, the principal went to this PD and then he's got to go back and he's got to fight and hunt and peck to get everyone on
Right.
board. If it's
Yep.
best practice, damn it, everyone needs to get on board. So anyway, all right, Nicole, I got to get into some brass tacks over here. All right, so in my line of work, we all help teachers and schools and things. There's four critical questions of that PLC. I love the simplicity of PLC work. And so when we're trying to work on those four critical questions, that second question, how will we know if students have learned it, is typically the assessment kind of piece, right? So I don't know, Nicole, maybe for those folks and listeners that are familiar with the four critical question PLC work, maybe some that are not, tell us how formative assessments or assessments in general fit into those four critical questions when teams are really collaborating with this work, because I think there's a huge difference between tests and common formative assessment. So I'll leave that kind of open-ended work for you, Nicole, and then Dr. Baker will take it from there.
Sounds good. No, that sounds great. So often, like in the Design in Five framework, one of the things that we did do is connect it to collaborative work. And so those four questions are often central to how a team would engage in the process. And so I think the first thing I would say is assessment, yes, well located in that second question, it relies on the first question heavily, otherwise it's not accurate. And how teams analyze the assessment relies on the instruction that's going to happen for questions three and four. So while assessment is located in that second question, assessment is a process. And it's really what we've found is how people handle assessment and how they position assessment can make or break how doable it feels, the process feels, and then how impactful it is. So if you think about what do we want students to learn? Well, if we want to choose an item or a task, or if we think of assessment as information, it could be a test, it could be observation. If it's grounded in what we want kids to learn, we want the information. We want assessment as evidence of the info. So the first question, what do we want kids to learn? Teachers have to have that very clear so that when we start to look at question two, how will we know if they have gotten it? When they're looking at the assessment evidence, it can actually tell them, oh, they understand this concept and not, oh, they're scoring below grade level. That's a very different thing if you have 55% or 60%, or you can understand, oh, I still need to work on citing evidence or whatever it is. So the whole notion of what do we want kids to learn and how will we know they've learned it, they're linked. And then what are we going to do about it when they do and don't? That's the analyzing the student work. And certainly you can analyze assessment data, and assessment data includes like how are kids explaining their thinking? How do we know they know something or don't know something? So it's really those four questions really ground the process of what do we want students to learn? How will we know? It could be multiple choice if it matches, constructed response, observations, but just broadening people's understanding. And then common formative assessments, it's that commitment that teams make to say, what's the most essential part? Because they can't respond to everything. So this notion of common formative, one of the things we talk about even before common is like, what is the purpose of assessment? So what's the difference between assessment that's used formatively versus summatively? So we talk a lot about formative assessment is not a method. Nobody can actually give anybody a formative assessment. It has to be used that way. In fact, if you have an end of unit assessment or something you called common summative, but we're committed to making sure all kids learn it, if some kids haven't learned it as measured by this common summative, it's now going to be formative for those students who need more, time. So the concept of formative and summative, we have messed around with to say, let's really think about this as action and not just, or verb and adverb, not noun, because really that's where people get over tested, where, I'll ask, people will ask oftentimes, how many common formative assessments should we give? And I always say, only as many as you can respond to. Because if you give a common formative, but there's no response, then it's not formative anymore. And that's where people start to feel over tested. So those 4 questions ground the work. And then, like, our frameworks are, how do you identify what's important to learn? How do you choose whether you're choosing something that someone else has developed as an assessment or you're going to design your own? Knowing that you got to match the learning to the assessment evidence is huge. And so how do teams do that? And then, of course, the response is where we see so much growth in instruction. So that would be my, like, 2 cents on that. We've got a little graphic that we use to actually ground the handbook. It was in the first piece, but the graphic that we use really grounds the assessment work in those 4 questions.
Great.
Anisa,
Yeah,
do you
Dr.
want
Baker.
to add to that?
Yeah. If I could share my screen, I would share it because I just pulled a graphic up as soon as you said
You
that.
can. Give me a second.
But I do want to just say what we have done in our handbook and what Nicole has done in her first and second edition is that she connects the dots between the 5 phases and the 4 critical questions. And it is what it will do is show, like, hey, based on our phases, what the work should look like as it falls or answers those 4 critical questions. But I do want to make sure that I say this is that regardless if schools or teams have been doing the PLC at work process or working with those 4 critical questions, the way that our handbook is set up is it doesn't matter if they're doing or have those 4 critical questions as their framework, it will still lend itself to them being able to follow these phases and use assessments to really drive their instruction and to help them to respond to the students and improve their instructional capacity or improve their learning outcomes. So that is the beautiful part of it, is that we were able to continue to connect the dots to the 4 PLC questions that we use in the PLC at Work framework. But we're also thinking about, there are some schools that have not quite dived into this work yet. And how are we able to still tap into them? Or what about schools or colleges or students who are learning about assessments in general? Like, they're taking their assessment class and they really want to know, how do we start using assessments? What does it really mean for us to assess our students? So this book is not just for, hey, here's a school that's in this PLC framework. It's for all schools. And it also could be used for colleges as they're preparing students, teachers, to go out and be great teachers and know how to use assessments coming right out of college. So we definitely was wanting to make this a book that was able to reach all audiences, no matter where they are in the PLC at work process, or no matter where they are in just using assessments to drive instruction, period.
You have a new book coming out, I understand, maybe in March 2026. Is that true? Is that rumor true?
The rumor is
That
true.
is true.
Fantastic. What's the name of the book? What's it about?
It is the Handbook for Design in 5 Assessment Tools and Protocols for Teachers and Teams.
So essentially, it takes the 5 phases, and I think it's like, to Anisa's point, it's a framework. It's not a prescription, or a script, and so that's part of what we wanted to make sure is that sometimes folks have taken a standard, teased it apart into learning targets and a progression ad nauseum, and so they don't want to start with phase 1, but that's a central part of the process. But you can start with phase 5, which is where you're analyzing student work, or you're analyzing the data and you're ensuring that students are reflecting and they are investing in the process, and developing feedback practices that are really powerful and lead to kids learning more. So the handbook is designed to first set up the 5 phases if people are not familiar with it, and then to go very quickly to which phase seems to be where your next step is, and provides practical tools and guidelines of how to do that, including some editable Google forms for people to kind of create their own. One of the things that we have found is that I often will share these 5 phases or just even snippets of them, but then teams or teachers need to co-create their own sequence of steps. So oftentimes then it's much more of an invested process instead of, oh, is this what you want? And I don't know if you've all had that experience where people will come and they're like, whether I'm the coach or the administrator or an outside person coming in, is this what you want? And it's almost like they're in the service of my goal instead of their own. And so a lot of this is trying to shift this to being about how do we help educators invest in a process? And we're giving them guidance so they can certainly follow the process if they want to, right, step by step, because we've done it, we've tested it multiple times. And that's why people will see so many examples and they have a little different twist because people need to contextualize it. It's like the one thing, like I'll never forget when I was working way harder than the folks I'm trying to support. I would get so excited. I would go back, I'd do this idea, and it did not play out the way
Sure.
the presenter or the team told me because context matters and how we invest in it is so important. So yeah, we've got a lot of tools that are super practical and a lot of examples that people can take and like use. And it's just so much the conversation to get people to think through, okay, where am I at? What am I doing really well? And what part can I let go of so that we can create assessment not as this like heaviness. Like I'll never forget my son is now a junior. I have three kids and my son is a junior in college right now. But it was during the pandemic when he was in 10th grade. He was taking American Sign Language and he stopped doing everything. He was one of those kids that kind of said, forget this, I'm just done. And he was not excited to ask when I would offer help. He just did not want my help. And so anyway, it was midterm and his American Sign Language teacher had done a Zoom interview. Thank goodness he showed up and he ran up the stairs and he's like, Mom, guess what? At the end of the interview, he had said, Reese, you know everything you need to know. So I'm going to exempt you from all those little assignments. And he's like, I think I might take ASL 2. And he went on to take ASL 3 and ASL 4. And it was like that moment where that teacher, she shifted from assessment being about compliance and completion to it really being about evidence of learning. And there's a whole host of things that he had to learn about accountability in terms of work habits, but that was separate from the learning itself. And so this book or this handbook is designed to help teachers do that, like lessen their work flow or make it more doable. And then also create space where kids are like, okay, this is possible. So let's use assessment to build kids up and also build up our educators. So
So
I
anything
think
to add, any other of those?
sounds like
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
sounds like a must read. That's a must read for March.
Oh, it's a
Oh,
must
for
read for
sure.
every single month. What are you talking about?
Well,
It's a
it's
must.
not until March, Nathaniel. You can't
Well,
read in January,
after
February.
March, then you read it for
After
March.
March, but go ahead in March and get that book. Nathaniel?
Give me the
I
five,
actually
Nicole.
like that.
Yeah,
I like that. The March, like a must read. Like I
must
like that
read.
launching. Like I
Must
like
read for
that.
March. Listen,
I
see,
might,
It's a
you
must.
might see
marketers
that. You might
over
see a
here.
hashtag of that.
Ooh, I like that.
Hashtag must read March. Give me the five, Nicole, for those that aren't familiar with these five. You kind of mentioned that you don't they're not it's a process, it's not like a prescription
Right,
or
but it
it's a,
is a
yeah, or
process,
something like
or it
yeah,
is
you're
a
right, right,
process.
right. And just
Mhm.
go through those five for us real quick, you two. Let's figure this out. Let's see what those five things.
All right, you want to back and forth, Anisa? I'll do
Okay.
phase
Well,
one is and sometimes what we'll tell folks is that you can choose a unit or a time frame. So you would implement these five phases like in a doable way. So phase one is choosing standards and setting like engagement. So this is that idea of how do you position learning, not just, when kids ask, why do we need to know this? Not just because it's going to be on the test, but like this learning is really important. So phase one provides an opportunity not only to choose standards or the learning goals or whatever you want kids to learn in that time frame, it's also a way to say, how do you position this in a context that is relevant and engaging? And
okay.
phase
And
two.
phase two is analyzing the standards and constructing a learning progression. So this is where we talk to them about how to stretch out that standard into to learning targets. We also talk about the success criteria in terms of this means. So when we create the learning target, we have them to talk about as a collaborative team that you have a shared clarity on what does it mean for a student to perform at proficiency. So we talk about that in that particular phase. And then we also talk about creating a learning progression. And so this will allow the teams to go from the most simplest form of the learning target all the way to the most complex. Because what we want them to see is that when you're teaching, you're breaking the standard apart. And so as they're breaking the standard apart and they're having these learning goals or these learning targets, what does it mean for a student to be proficient? But you may not always start there. So where does it look like? So starting even from sometimes identifying the prerequisite skills of that particular standard to moving up to what does on grade level work look like, and then going to the extensions, having them to be very intentional with stretching out that standard, talking about the success criteria, and then putting in a learning progression so that they can organize their teaching and also help them figure out where their students are along that learning progression. And when we talk about pre-assessments too, as we are analyzing that standard and creating it, and we identify the most simplest form of it, the prerequisite skills, that'll allow teams to build their pre-assessment there instead of trying to assess kids on standards that they have not taught. So it gives them a good idea to see, hey, where did the learning stop? So we can assess our students right here on this prerequisite skills to see what prerequisite skills or what scaffolding strategies do we need to use to scoop up the prerequisite and then connect it to grade level. The beautiful part about phase two is that it keeps the teachers focused on grade level learning. And I think that is so important because we have this thing where, hey, our kids cannot do it. So we would tend to just teach kids where they are.
Mm.
But creating the learning progression will allow them to be able to, yes, identify where kids are, but then have a plan of moving up the ladder progression to ensure that you teach grade level expectations to the students. And also allow them, for those kids that get it already, to not just say, hey, go get on the computer, or hey, go do this. We have identified already what the intentional extensions will be for this particular standard. So the learning progression, if they do that as a collaborative team, it will really help them with the planning as they move forward in their unit planning as well as in their teaching.
Cool. Number three.
Phase three is crafting an assessment plan. And so this is, I mean, if anybody's ever done backwards design, this is essentially what it is, just phase three, a little bit on steroids because it says, okay, let's take those grade level learning targets in the progression or however people sketch them out. And if they are already using assessments, then they just match up the items to make sure that what they're using on their assessment is reflected there. So phase three really captures the process of teams making sure that what they're using matches what they wanted students to learn. And of course, any curriculum, you all mentioned this in the beginning, any curriculum already sometimes has an assessment designed and they'll say it's really aligned to standards. But if too often it's maybe referenced or there's so many standards, like there's 1,000 in one unit, no way a teacher could actually help kids learn all of them to a deep level. And so the assessment plan helps people make intentional choices about what that would look like. And then phase three also includes just how do you choose a type of assessment item or task or question that actually gives you info on the learning you want for students. And so that cognitive level, making sure that kids are getting access to that.
And then we have phase four. Phase four is where we are creating the assessments and gathering the material. So we're taking everything that we've done in phase one, two, and three, and actually creating the assessment at this time. And this is where we're actually aligning the type of questions that we need to the learning target. So we're looking at whether it's going to be a multiple choice, a constructive response, a performance task, or the type of quality of the assessment that we're looking for to make sure that there's alignment between what the standard is asking or the learning goal is asking for the students to do, and then how we're assessing that. Because there's sometimes I know out of time that we will mix match the method to the actual learning target. And so because of time, teachers will resort to just doing everything by multiple choice. But if you're looking at the actual learning target or the standard, that will not always give you the information that you need to see if the student has actually mastered or demonstrated proficiency. So we take them through that whole process of, hey, we're gathering the materials, we're going to create the assessment, but we're also going to make sure that the questions that we have chosen actually align to the rigor level and to the type of learning target or learning goal or standard that we have here as we are creating the assessment.
We were kind of excited too because we put like quick tips and tricks for how do you critique different types of items in there. And then Anisa, we also included AI prompts. Now
Oh, yeah, I was
everybody's
going to talk
creating
about that
their
at the
own
end.
AI. Okay, okay. I'll let you talk about that then in a second.
Go
So
ahead.
phase five, I was getting excited. I was getting ahead of myself. I get ahead of myself. Okay, so AI to come. Phase five, then we broke down into 4 parts. It was originally one part or one phase, but we realized that so many people, there's a couple parts to it that are super important. So part one of phase five is a scoring scheme. So making sure that whether it's a cover page where students will see the learning, their items connected to a learning target or a rubric or a proficiency scale, whatever people are doing, how are you communicating to students what that assessment means in terms of learning? And then part two is this building a student reflection tool. So the other part of our work that is super center around assessment is how students are experiencing assessment. And I've done a ton of focus groups, actually co-created a school with kids. How do we do this dramatically differently? And of course, assessment and grading is part of that. And so how do we have students be reflecting on their strengths and next steps? And so that's phase five, part two. Phase five, part three then goes into actually collaborating, whether you're a grade-alike team, a course-alike team, a vertical team, an interdisciplinary team. How do you analyze the data and analyze student work to plan instruction and understand the power of your instruction. So that piece has a very specific protocol that we call the pile, stack, and plan, among a few other things, where teams are going to be responding to that common formative assessment data, or even just formative assessments, depending on their context. And then the final piece is using assessment to build student partnership. And this is where we know that the kids' confidence and their learning grows when they understand their strengths and they get an experience and they learn more and they can actually see their growth. And so phase 5, part 4 just highlights this idea of assessment as instruction. And that when we're using assessment to help students understand, so we have lists of how do you engage in dialogue, how do you engage in feedback practices that really shore up that assessment process.
Well, yeah,
All right.
got all five.
Okay, and then
Past our-
guys, there's this bonus that
Wait,
we have in our
there's
book.
more.
All right.
Yes. And so, like, under each phase, we have a section to help our teachers leverage AI to be able to do this work quickly. And so we talk about the different prompts. We give them the different type of AI tools out there. So we don't just stick with, hey, here's Chat GPT. Like, we explore many different AI tools, many different prompts that they can use to help to do this work as a collaborative team, because AI is out there. It's not going anywhere. So what we want to do is show teachers how to use it to help them do this work. And so we give them examples, we give them prompts, and throughout the book, we were very intentional to make sure that we have elementary examples and secondary examples, and we cover all content areas. So there's ELA, there's math, there's some science examples, social studies examples. So wherever you are, whatever team, because when you open up a book, or think about it, when you look at a picture, what do you look for first? You look for yourself, right? And so what we wanted to do is make sure whatever content, whatever grade, no matter what content area or grade span that you're teaching, you'll be able to find examples that you can relate to help you be able to do this work, along with using AI as a tool to leverage. So that is a bonus that we put in there for the teachers to help them save time. And we have this really super cool feature that is a QR code where they will be able to scan and go to a YouTube page where we will have live videos or that we have recorded that will give them examples of teacher teams or us talking them through the work, just to help them if they have some clarity, if they have questions and want clarity or anything like that.
Awesome.
So we have that as well as a bonus feature in the book.
That is fantastic. Yeah, I got everything.
We try. One-stop shop, a must-read for March and forever.
There you go. Hashtag.
Nathaniel, I think you got time for one more question, pal.
Well, okay. So that sounds great, Nicole and Dr. Baker. All that sounds just wonderful. Now usually it's Eric who's the
Naysayer?
curmudgeon. Curmudgeon,
Okay.
that's a good word. Curmudgeon. I'm going to be the
Sure.
curmudgeon over here, right? Okay.
Thanks,
So,
Nathaniel.
all right.
Appreciate
So
it.
here we go. But Nicole, when am I going to have time to do this? But Dr. Baker, we only have 45 minutes every other summer solstice to collaborate. And, but Nicole, we already have this high quality curriculum that the state of wherever, fill in the blank, must make us use. And it already has the assessments there. But Dr. Baker, I don't even like my team. So we got all this stuff, right? We got all this stuff. And the research is crystal clear because I'm a sucker for receipts. That formative assessment has 0.70 effect size. So this is really, really important stuff, but you're going to be bombarded with excuses about however, but, fill in the blank. So Nicole, kick us off. Where do we start with some of those well-meaning naysayers?
Yes, yes. Well, and I think depending on you named not only time and also like just the capacity people have. And so I think in terms of time, I'm really reflecting a lot now with folks on time as not scarcity, but capacity. So what's our current capacity? And then how do you do one thing really well? And so I think part of it is like conversation by conversation with folks. Or what's your content? What are people ready for? Sometimes they're not ready for the full 5 phases. Actually, the full 5 phases all at once are not possible or not
Right.
doable. It's one thing at a time. And so the first thing is like really assessing what's working. Where are the strengths? Because I think people feel bombarded with sometimes people are given a resource or they're, let's do this. It's because that their perception is they've been doing everything wrong.
Mm,
And so I think there's a reframe there of like, let's really look at what's on your plate. This isn't meant to be an add-on. This is actually meant to be something for you to assess your current work, what's working really well, where are some of your most complex issues, and let's see where the connection is to help you do this in a way that's efficient and effective. Now, if you're talking about culture and the fact that they don't trust one another, then the
mm,
team doesn't trust one another, and that's a big issue because that's true for students too. Do you know what the number one thing students say gets in the way of their learning? Time.
mm,
They don't
mm.
have time to think. And so time is not an issue only for our educators, it's also for our students. So the gift we give our students is when we focus on something that's really important and we make our work more doable, then they feel that. And so I think, but culture is important. And so like building a sense of, no, it's not that I may not agree with you as a colleague, and that's okay. What do we have to learn from one another? And I think
Sure.
that building of trust can happen when we use assessment in ways that lift people up instead of cut them down. Because too often, teams are looking at data by classroom in a quantitative manner. One of our big shift is from quantity to quality. So if we look at student work and we're not looking at like, oh, you're a bad teacher, you're a good teacher, even when we don't intend that, I think we have to change the process we use so people can get to what's working and then what's not about learning instead of this like comparative
Mm,
culture, which I know in theory, if you have a ton of trust, that can work, but often
sure.
it erodes trust until you have a sense of let's really get to the learning and what proficiency looks like and how we engage our young people in learning that really matters. So, I mean, there's not one answer to that in my lens, but that idea of time as capacity and then stepping back and identifying strengths and building on people's sense of hope and confidence. And then we do that through identifying what's working and then giving them permission to stop doing some things to focus on one or two things that work really well.
And I would like to add on, like, I'm glad that you said that because when we have to go back to the title, this is about
Mm,
assessment tools and protocols for teachers and teams. And so while we were writing this book, that was one of the things that we want to intentionally address. So in the introduction, we have a section that is about addressing the barriers that get in the way. And we wanted to do that first before we even get into efficient and effective assessment processes. So in the introduction, Nicole and I go through this piece and where we talk about time being a barrier for teachers and for students. We actually call it out because we understand as teachers, like this is a book for teachers, really. And what we talked about was we took actual teams, works from schools, work from teachers that we have been working with to actually help us framework or frame our handbook so that it can be a tools. And so we put in things that we hear. We put in things from my school, real teachers that were talking about how time was getting in the way and the use of technology and how to effectively use it. So that's why you see that this book is really important for us to give to teachers and teams because we took the time to build the protocols and the tools to give them to help with the barrier of time, which we call out. We talk about how that gets in the way and how to use that. We also focus and talk about the quantity of it and are focusing on the quantity, not just the quality of it, not just the quantity, because we understand that people want to give more assessments, but giving more that are not getting the information that they need is not helping them, or just thinking of a number and just trying to give more so you can get grades. Like we actually talk about focusing on the quality of it. And then we also talk about when schools have curriculum resources that are given to them and they have assessments that they have to use, how they can still do this process with vetting those assessments to ensure that they're still getting that information because they may, as a collaborative team, have to go back and either add some questions to it. They may have to rephrase some things. So we were able to take all of the real things that teachers say to us and put this in a resource to help them be able to navigate and focus on building efficient and effective assessment processes.
Must read.
awesome. Must read
Hey,
March.
Mr.
Anisa,
Must Read March.
where can people find you?
Oh, they can find us, well, for all of us, both Nicole and I, both on the Solution Street website. So they are able to go in and actually, if you Google us, it will pop up, type in our name, Anisa Baker-Busby and Nicole Dimich, it will pop up and you can contact Solution Tree to bring us to your school to be able to provide PD and assist your teams, your teachers and teams.
That sounds like a great investment.
Awesome.
Finally, what words of inspiration do you have for our audience?
What words of all right, Nicole, you want to go first? Because you was just talking about building on hope, and then I'll follow up.
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know, inspiration or wisdom. It's just like believing in one another. I think so often assessment has been positioned as this thing over here or this heavy piece. And for me, assessment, when it's done really well, can help us like build on strengths and create spaces of possibility. So it's like seeing possibility, and that part of it is just where when the light goes off and people are like, yes, this is doable, and then students can see that as the outcome of that. So I'm not sure that's inspirational, but just that idea of really thinking differently about assessment as a way to build relationships and a way to build hope, efficacy, and achievement is huge.
Appreciate that. Lisa?
And that is pretty much what I was going to say as well, as looking at assessment as a way to build hope in kids and hope in your team. And we understand that hope is not a strategy, but having it to help them be excited about learning and using it as a tool to communicate to kids that, hey, this is where you are right now, this is where you're going, and this is how we're going to get you there, and get them as excited about learning and those outcomes. And just wanted to let teachers know that I know this time is hard, but we are here to support you along the way. We appreciate everything that they're doing in the classrooms. And this is a tool, really, it's a gift from us to help them be able to do this work, because we appreciate the time that they put in to do this work, the dedication that they have. And we know that teachers come to school and they work hard every single day. And it's about helping them be able to work hard on the right things so that they can get the results that they are wanting to get from their kids, which we know that is learning at high levels, grade level plus. And so that's what we want to do, is to be able to support them and doing the work that they were called to do. And that is to ensure that all kids read, write, and think on grade level.
Thank you both. I appreciate that. Nathaniel, bring us home, pal.
Let's do it. I mean, I wish we had about 3 more hours to talk about this. So I'm expecting a part 2 very, very, very soon. But look, I agree with you guys. I'm a sucker for this work. And listen, the word test is a 4-letter word, but the word assessment is not, right? And I just think that assessments, when done well, when teams have that psychological safety, right, Dr. Worster? We talked about that, right? Amy Edmondson. If a team can have that psychological safety to know that we don't have to be great with everything, but let's just create one assessment that really meets the demands of that verb. And let's really navigate that collective teacher efficacy to come together and create goals for ourselves, make sure our practice is being like we're actually teaching like very, very well, and we're getting feedback as much for ourselves as for our students. That assessment is the bridge between our professional intent and our actual impact, right? And I think that this book and the work of this tag team championship team over here, right, is really going to help put that together. So I can't wait for March for this thing to come out, man, and I can't wait to use it for my coaching when I'm coaching teams as well. So with that, thank you to both for being awesome additions to this community connection. Eric, let's go take some assessments, brother. What do you think? Let's do it.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you very much for joining the community connection. Y'all take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Appreciate you.
Community connection, reaching out so far, linking minds and sharing insights.